On Sunday and Monday, we'll be exploring everything Andy Griffith at Mt Airy. We ate lunch at Aunt Bee's Hickory Smoked Barbecue, but Aunt Bee wasn't in. So we decided to go over to the Mayberry Inn and to see her room, and caught the police car there. Now we head downtown to the Mt Airy historic downtown, and we'll be going to the Andy Griffith home place. This is where he lived from 1935 to 1966, and it's actually part of a hotel now, so if you'd like to stay there, you can. Now we drive over to the main street and drive along it to see what it looks like today. Now we're going to head over to Wallys service station and squad car tours and look around there some. They have it set up kind of like Mayberry, so you can experience what the show might have been, even though none of it was filmed here. And through these doors you head into the jail, where Andy spent most of his time as sheriff and as justice of the peace. Is that Andy on the phone?
This is Andy.
Why, that looks like Emmett's there. I know he's still in the key. Outside you can see the various places that would have been around town. And there's the Darling truck. And their home. Next door is Wallys Towing. And oh, Goober said, hey, we've come here to catch our police car ride. But we'll look around inside some first. We'll be remembering both Barney and Andy as we ride in the police car in just a few minutes. This is not one of the original police cars, but it's the same make and model as what they would have used. Our guide will be Jonathan. Let's listen to him a while.
Throw at me.
And this is Jonathan. Okay.
From Mt Airy, all my life. As the old man said, so far.
So far.
Mm-hmm.
You probably knew Andy had intentions of being a Moravian minister.
No, I didn't know that, but
He attended UNC Chapel Hill with the intentions of going through the curriculum to be an ordained minister. And he himself said he was not a good student and was having trouble with the sociology classes and decided music would be his major. But I always point out to people, through his show, he ministered to the world.
He did.
Just as you was talking about good moral teachings, how people ought to be treated. Of course, he told a few little white lies that make Barney look good once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
This is a 1962 Ford Galaxy. It's the same body style they used on the 3rd season of the Andy Griffith Show. Ford was a sponsor, and every season they loaned them 3 cars to film with. They rotated. Next season, newer body style. Through the process, Ford sold them as used cars, and Ford didn't keep up with the vehicle numbers, VIN numbers. So apparently those cars are lost to history. There's no way to identify an original squad car used on the show. Or at least that's the general idea. Gotta do the siren. Mt Airy is also known as the Granite City. Not promoted that way anymore. This church, and about 8 more of them here in town, are built out of granite. This one was built in 1903 by the employees themselves. The superintendent at the time, John Sargent, thought they needed a house of worship since so many of them lived nearby. Plus, there might have been the problem of when they weren't working, they was a drinking. That might have had something to do with it.
I'm busy.
Been operating as an active quarry since 1889, and they think they can mine this site 300 to 500 more years because there's so much of it. What you're looking at is just a tiny fraction of what's available. This deposit's 4 miles wide, 7 miles long, and right here it goes 8,000 feet deeper in the ground. So there's 1.5 miles of granite underneath us. Most of what this company does is make street curbs out of it. Sidewalk pavers, maybe a commercial building will be faced with it. Countertop material, they supply it to a contractor that actually creates the countertop, but never finished on site. And of course you can buy it for driveway gravel and landscaping stone. You can even buy this Mt Airy granite crushed up into a grit. It's fed to chickens and turkeys because birds of all kinds have to have some form of grit in their crop to digest their food. You're looking into Virginia. You probably know the origins of the Andy Griffith Show go back to the Make Room for Danny Thomas show.
Not totally, no.
That's where they introduced Mayberry and Sheriff Taylor. It was in spring of 1960, probably one of the last episodes of that show. Sheldon Leonard, the director, and Danny Thomas had the concept, the basic idea of what Andy's show became. A small town somewhere in the South where the sheriff didn't carry a gun. And Andy had already made or did Broadway productions, feature films. This was his first opportunity for a television show. So him and his manager, Richard Link, bought into the business, and Andy had plenty of opportunity to influence the script. According to his biography, early in the series, he got tired of using whatever the scriptwriters created as far as names, and he fell back on what was familiar to him, what he felt comfortable with. And that's where Mt Airy starts working its way into Mayberry, kind of by accident. I don't think it was planned, just like Andy had said so many times. Street corners, streets of Mt Airy, real life diners you could eat at on Main Street, and now the Snacky Lunch is the only one still in business. They spoke of the Wiener Burger, the canteen, the Bluebird Diner was real to Mt Airy, but it's now recently been closed.
Well, how does a typical Mt Airyan think about Andy Griffith? Do they think it's just a distraction or what?
It's a mix. There's some of that. Andy never made himself available to Mt Airy, and as far as public appearances, some people thinks Andy didn't care anything about Mt Airy, so why should we promote it as Mayberry in his hometown? So it's a mix of feelings about that. Andy grew up on the poor side of the tracks. He had the experience of some of the kids making fun of him, the way he was dressed.
Yeah.
They weren't poor people that went without. They had what they needed, but the household income wasn't that great. His mama stayed at home, kept house, and his daddy worked in a local furniture factory.
They had what they needed, but not much extra.
Right. The First Baptist Church here, obviously Granite.
Beautiful.
And it takes up the whole city block. I think that was built in 1966, that sanctuary, and then this is the original church from 1907.
It was so beautiful.
In 1993, they spent about $1 million restoring this part of the church, put a full basement under it. And in the process, they collapsed the left tower and part of the face of the church into the street. So there is some new stone, like there's 7 new stones in the archway. They recreated. John Sargent. Well, first of all, this neighborhood was built by business people. They were granite quarry owners, merchants, bankers in the early 1900s. John Sargent was a granite quarry owner. He built the house with the green slate roof. He used flower planters and porch railings. The garage made out of granite. Showed the customer what they could do with granite. So that's the most elaborate granite house we have in town. There's a lot of them, but none really compared to this one.
It's so pretty. I could live there at.
You could.
The Episcopal Church down here, designed to seat 80 people, built in 1896, would make it one of the oldest surviving buildings on Main Street.
That's church here.
This one on the left.
So I think did it say wedding chapel or something on it now? Maybe I didn't see that.
No, it's still an active congregation. Because of its size, they do have 2 particular beliefs, and that's close fellowship and deodorant.
Oh, yeah.
Even when it was built, the architect questioned its size because there's only 80 people could only be seated. And one of the church leaders says, don't worry about it, it'll hold what Christians they are in Mt Airy. I think we have most every denomination you could think of. We even have a small synagogue. We have the Holy Angels Catholic, we have Lutheran, about 240 Baptist churches.
Now back
around
there,
here.
I thought I saw a Jewish thing. It's a bit.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
kind of recent. I don't know what that building was originally, but it's being used as a synagogue.
Okay.
I wouldn't have paid any attention to it, but I had some Jewish folks with me the other week.
Well, I recognize the word B-E-I-T and Messiah or Mishak or something.
Like Mishma.
Something like that.
If you're looking for a bite to eat, you only got 2 choices on Sunday. The deli here at the winery, and then Walker's Soda Fountain coming up shortly. If you'd like to learn more about early Mt Airy, we have the 4-story Museum of Regional History there on the right, which is where I learned most of my history of the granite quarry. The Bluebird Diner, spoke of so many times on the show, was last located here on the left, now out of business.
Well, maybe somebody will take it over.
Well, it happened over the years. The original site that I grew up with was on up here close to the barbershop. I remember the Bluebird as a place to get something to eat, but they also serve beer.
Oh.
So you might say Juanita was working at the beer joint,
Yeah, you might.
to make a joke out of it. Andy would occasionally use family names on the show, and apparently he had a cousin named Juanita.
Oh.
As Opie gets older in the color episodes, his best friend was Arnold. Arnold Griffith is still living. And a name combination from the Moravian Church. Andy attended the Moravian Church also. One of the church members told me Andy got into some mischief growing up here, and the police were involved. And for spite, he named Otis the Drunk after Otis Brinkley and Keith Campbell.
Oh.
And I've looked into it. They were real police officers at Mt Airy.
Oh, that's funny.
Of course, the church member didn't tell me what kind of trouble it was. Maybe out of respect for Andy. Probably nothing much.
Just something kids would do.
Well, I got into my little scrapes. I never got arrested or Nothing bad, but I had my own little scrapes growing up. That's our visitor center here on the left, if y'all haven't found it, or if you do need more information. The Walker Soda Fountain, I mentioned it earlier, it's coming up on the right. It's an old drugstore site Andy worked at as a teenager. It was the Lamb drugstore for 60 or 70 years. Because it was a drugstore and Andy worked there, they call it Walker's after the show. You might say he was in drug trafficking because he delivered prescriptions on his bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
We have Kate and Rose, 2 mules up here, offering a mule ride, $5 a head. He gives a little history of the town. Now I know y'all not interested in it, but I always tell people they can get some moonshine ice cream at Miss Angel's. I don't think it really got as much kick.
Just the name, Opus Candy Store.
Yeah, that's a little spin off of the show, and there's the Floyd City Barbershop. Probably dates to 1940. The Snappy Lunch is really old. It goes to 1923.
Now, we're going to try to eat there tomorrow.
They do breakfast and lunch.
What time do they open? You know?
Probably about 6 anyway.
6, and then they're open from then on?
Till about 1:45.
Okay.
And never on Sundays.
All right, yeah, I knew
The street corner of Pine and Main, that's referenced on the episode where Ernest T. tried to join the Army. All he wanted was a uniform to impress the girls. He thought it would help him get girlfriends.
I remember that one.
And they got after him for breaking street lights and windows, and Andy said something like, "Come on, Barn." He's headed to the corner of Pine and Main. We'll catch up with him there.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Rockford Street, 2 blocks north of Wallys. If you haven't found it, here is the Andy Griffith Museum, which includes the original set of jail keys Andy used on the show, or Otis used. Barney's salt and pepper suit worn on the show.
Okay.
Andy would have certainly attended this. Spent a lot of hours here, 1st through the 7th grade. And when they did salvage it back in '75, they asked Andy's permission to name it the Andy Griffith Playhouse, and I've always heard it tickled him to death. He was pleased with it. Because he didn't always have such good memories of Rockford Street Elementary.
Yeah, we all have some of those.
Because some of the kids were cruel to him.
We all have those.
In one of his interviews, he said he got beat up here at school just because his daddy had voted for President Hoover.
Oh.
He was Republican. And then Andy smiled and he said, "That's why I'm a Democrat now."
Because it got beat up.
That's a 2.5 hour long interview you can find on the internet. I don't think he's ever been here. Haymore Baptist Church, this is mostly where Andy attended. But at the age of 14, he took the notion he wanted to play the slide trombone. And he bought him a used one, but he still couldn't play it. And the school didn't have a music program. But the Moravian church did, as you guys probably know. Music's a big part of their worship. So he was, the Reverend Ed Mickey, who directed the band, taught him music lessons, voice lessons. He learned how to play all the instruments. Was a member of that church throughout high school. And then attended UNC Chapel Hill. He was a member of that church when he died. I think he rejoined it, moved his membership back in 2008. And as long as he was able to travel, he did make rare Sunday visits for Sunday services at the Moravian Church. Unannounced, of course. They never knew when he was coming. We just turned at the corner of Haymore and Rockford, referenced as the school crossing in Mayberry.
Oh,
And this is the house. It's not the only house they lived in, but it's the only one they ever owned. His mom and daddy bought it when he was 9 years old in 1935. It was approximately $500. And they're the ones that lived here to 66. Andy being the only child, and pretty sure they was retired at that point. On the Outer Banks, they were born in the 1890s, where the Lost Colony was. Mm-hmm. Which is what attracted, how Andy first got introduced, because he did that He performed in the Lost Colony in college.
Mm-hmm.
He had bought about 70 acres over the years, and he's buried on his property. From about 1990 to 91, that was his permanent residence. He had sold everything in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that from the biography of it.
So did they let people go out and see his grave? Or?
No, I think
Okay.
it's
private.
private.
Get a quick picture.
Sure. Well, as long as you guys don't mind.
I don't
Well, here's where I tell people about the Taylor connection. Andy's grandmother was Sally Taylor Griffith. You gotta figure that's why it's Sheriff Taylor on the show. Quite a few times, I'd say 6 times, Andy's favorite cousin is referenced on the show. The family tells me he knew she'd get a kick out of hearing her name. Her name is Lorraine Beasley.
Ain't me.
Possibly. If Lorraine Beasley was the favorite cousin, I would suggest maybe her mother, Aunt Jenny Beasley, was the bee in Andy's life.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's purely a suggestion. There's no way to know. We had a sheriff, Sam Patterson, neighbor to Andy, worked at the chair factory as a night watchman with Andy's daddy. He was sheriff from 1942 to 54, 12 years. Never known to carry a gun. Didn't even have a driver's license when he was sheriff, so had to be drove everywhere he went or catch a cab. And we know from other records he had a deputy named Barney Venable from Pilot Mountain. Sounds a lot like Sheriff Taylor, don't it?
Mm-hmm.
Could be a good example of why Andy never totally admitted or fully admitted Mount Airy had anything to do with Mount Mayberry, because maybe he feared he'd be sued in court for liability or character impersonation.
He probably would be today. Not so much today.
From what I've heard about this Sam Patterson, I don't think Sam would have cared.
Well, some of the others might.
And hopefully the show won't ever be the same to you after taking the tour.
I don't think it will be. I told the people with our Bible study we're doing today. Next, we'll look around the Andy Griffith Museum. You can't take pictures inside, but I did take some through the windows of the door. Next door is a different kind of museum. They had a pair of Siamese twins that lived here at one time and traveled the world. Siamese twins had a very large family with over 21 children, both being married. And is this one in the back in this picture. Now we head downtown for a little walking around and seeing some of the sights. The Earl Theater is a very historical site where many different scenes in old times happened. Snappy Lunch is where we'll be eating lunch. It's mentioned in the show when Barney is told to take a date there, and it's been going since then. It's famous for its fried pork chop sandwich. And I had to get me one, and this brings this trip to Mount Airy to an end.